Alright, I was just going through my YouTube inbox and I found a video doing a review of the 4K Blu-ray release of Batman from 1989. Now, I don't know if, like 4K, sure, I mean, it's really exciting and everyone's excited for it and they hope that it will become cheaper to the point where it can become the standard. But when it comes to upscaling like older films, particularly films from like before 4K digital cameras, I just don't see the appeal. I don't want to always be a downer. Like the last episode I did was on, I don't see the appeal of ray tracing. Well, actually, that's not true. Ray tracing, I did say, was the future. I just wish that the processing performance was better at handling it at good frame rates and stuff. But anyways, moving on. So 4K video, on the other hand, I don't know if I would ever want 4K video for quite a few reasons. Number one, I think the only reason why anyone would ever want 4K is if they are either A, sitting really close to the monitor or TV that they're viewing it from, so that they can get the full effect of the sharpness of 4K, or B, they have a massive, massive TV that fills almost their peripheral vision and has that sort of IMAX experience. But outside of that, I am 100% convinced that there is no place for 4K. I think that 4K will be much like IMAX. IMAX has been around for quite a few decades, but it's still a novelty. It's still like a prestigious experience of going to the cinema. And in the case of 4K, I think it's the same thing. It's like, why would you need 4K if you're not going to really take advantage of it? If you're not going to either A, sit really close to your TV, or B, have a really massive TV where you can see all of that glorious detail. But, that's with new things. But going back to the Batman 4K Blu-ray, I thought that was just hilarious, because the problem with film, especially old film, is that if you are watching a high enough resolution version of a film from like the 70s or 80s or 90s, sorry, my alarm's just going off, just turn it off. If you go back far enough and you watch these at extremely high resolutions, what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of grain. You're going to see a lot of like spots on the screen, a lot of imperfections. And to me, I remember the first time I saw this on normal Blu-ray, never mind 4K. This was, over like 10 years ago, back in 2006, 2007. There was this demo video at this, this is when flat panel HD TVs were new. And they were showing scenes from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is a film from 1977, I think. And I remember looking at it and being all like, ugh, it's so grainy, it's so gross looking. And that's the thing, is that when you watch these movies, we were watching them back then, we were watching them on, just standard definition televisions. Many of us were watching on CRTs, and those televisions would hide the graininess, would hide the imperfections in the images. Now, I'm not saying we should go back to CRTs, not at all. I'm just saying that, well, fortunately, in recent history, people have been able to, thanks to technology, been able to clean up these old movies to look good on standard 1080p HD resolution, which is great. But 4K, I don't know. I think that's really pushing it. Like 4K for modern films, sure, fine. But, a lot of people assume that technology is just going to keep going and going and keep improving. But here's the thing, again, with IMAX has been around for a very long time. But IMAX has not replaced the original 35mm film that we're used to watching in our normal cinemas, and eventually that 35mm gets converted to DVDs or Blu-rays or streaming services and what have you. But here's the other thing that I don't quite understand. There's also talk of people introducing 8K. Now, seriously, I mean, like 4K is one thing, but 8K, come on. I think that is just absurd. It is such a waste of resources, and it's just needless waste of manpower and money. And I don't care. Like, look, I'm not saying that 8K and 4K isn't useful in certain things, but the one thing that 8K is not useful is just normal films. That's it. Like 8K is brilliant for like I don't know, like TV production, where because one of the biggest problems when you film something is that you cannot zoom into something, because if you zoom into an already filmed image, the image is gonna be blurry as you zoom in. But with 4K or with 8K, you have this ability to do post-production zooming without losing detail, which is great. I'm just saying that for normal everyday home use, it's a waste. But here's the thing. Apparently, we all assume that these big companies, like Hollywood and big tech companies, they love using 4K and 8K. Well, it turns out that even the greatest of Hollywood films, the most technologically advanced Hollywood movies, don't even go that high in terms of resolution. I was shocked, and I had to double check this information. I was shocked to find out that Avengers Endgame, that came out just a few months ago, was shot in 2K. So not even 4K, never mind 8K, forget about that. So, and why did they shoot in 2K? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. Costs. See, Hollywood is so concerned about costs. They're not going to throw money down the drain if they don't really need to. And to them, they feel like that 2K is adequate, which means that when these movies, and it's not just, Avengers Endgame, it's like the majority of films are not even shot in 4K. And, but what happens is that, eventually there will be a 4K version of Avengers Endgame. But they're just going to either just do basic linear upscaling, which will make the image, sharper than 1080p, but not as sharp as 4K. And that's pretty much the best they can do. Or if they're willing to spend the extra money, they'll probably use some advanced machine learning upscaling technology, which is fine. But I don't know if they're actually going to do that. And and there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, there is a sort of resolution threshold where the resolution doesn't matter. And I think like 2K is probably that sweet spot, because when I watch stuff, never mind in 4K or 2K, even in just 1080p, like sometimes an image won't be perfectly sharp, because, how sharp an image is used to be determined by how sharp the camera was, or how big the film was, or how sophisticated the lenses were. But now it seems to be just how skilled the cameraman is at just keeping the shot in focus. Even in 1080p, there are some shots that are not completely in focus, because it's really hard to keep these shots in focus constantly, all the time, perfectly throughout every single take. And I think that there's just sort of that threshold where you're going to notice the camera being out of focus more than you're going to notice the image being pixelated due to a lack of resolution at 2K or especially 4K. So again, I'm not saying that, we should stifle progress. It's fine that we improve technologies. I mean, look, here's the thing. I do think that 1080p is probably a bit too low when it comes to film. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you ask, the original Star Wars, not trilogy, but the prequel films that came out between, particularly two movies, Episode 2 and Episode 3, which were shot using digital cameras. Episode 1 was shot using film, traditional 35mm film. But the first ever digital cameras that were used to record Star Wars Episode 2 and Episode 3 were in 1080p, so there will never be a 4K or even 2K version of those films, and many other films that were shot also on 1080p. But you know what? I don't think most people notice or even care. I think that because the reason why I know this is because it was hard to find information about this, which just shows how few people actually care about this stuff. All that people really care about isn't so much the resolution, as long as it's over 1080p, but I think people are more concerned about the quality of the image itself that is being captured. The color quality, the how good the cinematography is, the lighting and all of that stuff. And so, again, I know I might sound like this old fogey that is complaining, oh, there's new technology. In my day, I used to watch stuff in a small tube, and that's all I ever needed. No, no, no. I absolutely love new technology. I absolutely love just how crisp and sharp these new TVs are. But man, they're so expensive. And that's the problem, is that if you want a really large TV, you're going to have to pay out of your nose to get it. And the reality is the vast majority aren't going to get that, which means that the vast majority of Hollywood movies are not going to film at those extreme resolutions. And I know that at the end of the day, people are going to say, yeah, but technology is going to improve and it's going to become cheaper. But here's the thing, Hollywood doesn't really care about always constantly being cutting edge. Hollywood cares about having a nice balance between quality and cost efficiency. So, like, for instance, if you want to do visual effects using computer rendering, CG effects and stuff like that, it costs a lot of money. And yes, computers have improved so much, but as computers improve, we're able to do more and put more detail into these visual effects. But artificially increasing the cost of some CG shots just because you want it in 4K or 8K as opposed to 2K, yeah, most executives do not want to do that, just to increase costs just because, for the heck of it. And they're not going to do that. They haven't been doing that. Some people have, especially with frame rates. You know, there's been some filmmakers that are really pushing for 60 FPS or 48 FPS. I know that the Hobbit trilogy is one famous example of this. Films are 24 frames a second, and the reason why most of Hollywood doesn't want to move up to 48 frames a second is because Hollywood is always trying to find ways to reduce costs, because they are putting so much money into the actual look of the film, never mind what format it's on. The format is adequate as far as Hollywood is concerned. And I agree with them, because, you know, there are so many films that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and when they do badly at the box office or they do mildly well, the last thing you want to think about is, oh man, they've wasted so much money on this film. So this is one of the reasons why film will not only generally sit around 2K or maybe 4K eventually as the technology becomes cheaper, but never 8K. I can promise you that. Unless we're talking about the IMAX experience. But also the film will stay 24 FPS. I can go into more detail into this, but you know what? Go check out Film IQ, I think it's called, and go look up the video about 24 FPS. Something, I'll put a link, I forget what it's called exactly. I think it's called Why 24 FPS Will Stay Forever or something like that.